the instant Yandy Smith entered the room. Something changed because this was not the heartfelt Yandy that the world had seen on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta for years. The individuals seated around her could sense that she was carrying a weight that had obviously been developing for a long time. At first, the discussion appeared to be typical, just another get-together where friends catch up and discuss the turmoil of life. However, there was a crack in Yandy's voice. Abruptly, the room's whole atmosphere shifted. She started speaking with a softness that startled everyone listening. In contrast to the powerful, assertive woman fans are accustomed to seeing, she made an admission that no one had anticipated hearing aloud. She had been experiencing severe depression. It was hard for her to continue acting as though everything was fine, because she was emotionally depleted in addition to being exhausted and stressed. Yandy has been portrayed by fans for years as the strong one, the organizer, the mediator, and the lady who manages the constant pressure of celebrity while maintaining connections and family. But now, at last, the mask slipped, as she described how the burden of her marriage troubles with Mendeecees Harris, public attention, and unwavering expectations had been subtly accumulating inside her. Her voice faltered. The room fell silent when she eventually uttered the words aloud to the gathering. When Yandy, the woman who always seems to have everything under control, revealed that she was overtaken by emotion. Not only was she in pain, but there was more to the shock. It was becoming aware of how long she had been keeping it a secret. As everyone in the room listened intently, it became evident that this discussion was going to expose far more than anyone had anticipated. For Yandy Smith, Harris has long been regarded as one of the most powerful figures in the hip-hop and romance industries. Atlanta's portrayal of herself as someone who always had control over her emotions and has allowed viewers to observe her handle turbulence, relationship problems, family responsibilities, and career pressures. However, what many failed to notice behind the scenes showed how the pressure had been steadily increasing over time. For years, Yandy has played the character of the responsible person, the one who tries to hold everyone together when things go wrong. She has frequently been forced to maintain her composure when everything around her changed. From handling family disputes to responding to criticism from the public, that kind of responsibility can gradually become too much to handle, particularly if people believe that you are strong and never falter. There were high expectations for her. Fans witnessed a self-assured businesswoman, a devoted wife, and a protective mother. However, those positions also came with ongoing scrutiny. Viewers, bloggers, and social media pundits scrutinized every choice she made, seldom taking into account the mental damage caused by that degree of exposure. Her complex marriage to Mendeecees Harris was at the heart of a lot of that pressure. For many years, their relationship has been one of the most talked about plots in the larger world of hip-hop and love. Viewers saw them deal with challenging circumstances that most couples would find impossible to handle in private, let alone in front of cameras. Over the course of several seasons, and millions of viewers thought there were times in their love journey when they were devoted, selfless, and resilient. However, there were also protracted periods of separation, rumors, and harsh public criticism. Emotional weariness can result from being in a relationship that is continuously scrutinized by strangers on the internet. The internet rarely allows the past to vanish, even when couples want to move on. In addition to keeping her marriage intact, Yandy had to safeguard her emotional stability, while everyone else conjectured about every aspect of their lives. The part she plays in her group of friends and castmates added another level of pressure. Relationships among cast members on reality TV can rapidly get messy. Millions of people watch as conflicts break out, alliances change, and personal disputes develop into narratives. Yandy frequently found herself serving as a mediator, attempting to diffuse tensions or persuade others to consider alternative viewpoints, although that duty may appear commendable on TV. Continuously taking in other people's issues might gradually deplete their emotional reserves. Everyone looks to you for support when you're the strong buddy, but very few pause to consider whether you need assistance as well. Then there's the difficulty of juggling parenthood with the erratic lifestyle that comes with celebrity. As a mother, Yandy has often expressed her desire to give her kids security and opportunity. However, it takes ongoing effort to manage business endeavors, filming schedules, and public attention while raising a family. Even when they are experiencing personal struggles, parents frequently feel pressured to project strength for their kids. Feelings of loneliness might result from emotional repression. You start carrying your pain inside because you think that sharing it could make you seem helpless or feeble. Many people in her immediate vicinity were never completely aware of the emotional buildup caused by all these variables. Yandy appeared calm and prosperous from the outside. She managed business projects, went to events, made media appearances, and provided for her family. However, the weight of unresolved emotional tension, expectations, and duties was mounting. The setting she was in made the issue even more challenging, because vulnerability can easily be misconstrued as weakness or used against someone in future conflicts. Reality television encourages people to project strong personas, The discrepancy between Yandy's public persona and her inner feelings grew with time. She felt more pressure to uphold that image the more powerful she seemed to the outside world. It produced a vicious loop in which acknowledging emotional suffering seemed nearly impossible. People anticipated Yandy should constantly be prepared, maintain composure, and exhibit fortitude. Even the strongest people, however, eventually reach a point where it is impossible to ignore the emotional burden. That's the background to the day she eventually sat down with the group and acknowledged that she was having difficulties. Her remarks weren't random. They were the outcome of years of accumulating pressure, difficulties in relationships, public scrutiny, obligations to one's family, and the ongoing need to always look strong. It wasn't just a dramatic admission for TV when she eventually admitted that she had been depressed. It was the outpouring of feelings that had been growing in silence for a very long time. And after those emotions began when she came out, none of the people in her immediate vicinity realized that the woman they believed had everything under control had been fighting a silent inner battle all along. When Yandy Smith Harris finally gave up attempting to keep things together, the tension in the room changed. Viewers have witnessed her portray herself as the woman with the answers for years on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, the one with navigational skills, chaos without ever seeming disturbed. However, something was obviously different throughout this discussion with the group. Everyone seated around her instantly felt the weight in her voice when Yandy started talking about how much the strain had been affecting her. What had begun as a routine conversation gradually became much more emotional. Rather of using her typical assured tone, she revealed that she had been experiencing emotional and mental difficulties in ways she had never disclosed before. Because it revealed a part of Yandy that most people don't see, the moment seemed raw and awkward. As she went on, the group came to see that the powerful persona she had cultivated for so long had been concealing something grave. She clarified that she had gradually become emotionally exhausted due to the ongoing pressure from her marital problems with Mendices Harris, the public attention around their relationship, and the duty of being the person everyone counts on. She talked about feeling psychologically drained, overburdened, and worn out. The group was stunned to hear those statements from someone who usually seems impenetrable. Many of the folks seated next to her appeared shocked since they had never witnessed Yandy show such vulnerability. When she candidly acknowledged that she had been depressed, the conversation took a startling turn. Emotional admissions are common in reality TV settings. However, there was something odd about this moment, or it wasn't presented for attention or dramatic impact. It sounded like someone who had finally come to the conclusion that they could no longer remain silent. Yandy clarified that she had neglected to take care of her emotional needs because she had been as busy trying to be strong for everyone around her, including her husband, kids, friends, and even the audience watching her life unfold. The dynamics of the room were instantly altered by that admission. Everyone adopted a more supportive and attentive stance in place of the disagreements or fights that occasionally occurred during group talks on the show. People leaned forward and listened intently, attempting to comprehend how someone they thought was so strong had gotten to such an agonizing emotional state. It made the group face a reality that many people ignore. The strongest people are sometimes the ones who carry the greatest emotional loads in silence. However, the discussion continued after she revealed that she was depressed. Another level of tension emerged as Yandy continued to open up. She said that a portion of her emotional problem stemmed from feeling as though she had to manage her marriage almost by herself while coping with ongoing public scrutiny. She was under too much strain to manage her own emotional well-being while simultaneously defending her relationship with Mendy. She was caught between needing time to analyze her own emotions and wanting to remain faithful to her family. As the group realized the profundity of what she was conveying, the room became even quieter. A lot of people who watched the scene afterwards reported that it was like seeing someone let go after years of holding their breath. Yandy wasn't merely expressing melancholy. Few people in her immediate vicinity really comprehended the weariness she was displaying from bearing obligations. And as she talked, it became evident that this was more than a fleeting emotional exchange. It was about years of pressure coming to the surface in a single impactful confession. Everyone was shocked to learn that the woman who frequently assisted others in resolving their issues had been fighting her own issues in silence the entire time. Yandy was no longer the organizer, the fixer, or the strong person who kept everyone else together for the first time. She was just a person who wanted to be heard. And while the group considered what she had just exposed, a new query started to emerge in everyone's thoughts. What would happen to Yandy's future, her connections, and the life she had fought so hard to create if she had been feeling this overwhelmed for so long? The vibe in the room didn't just change. It got heavier after Yandy Smith Harris acknowledged that she had been depressed. What had begun as an honest moment soon evolved into something more profound, because issues that had been subtly developing for a while started to come to light once Yandy opened out about her feelings. The group came to the conclusion that this was more than just a terrible week or momentary stress. For years, this person had been carrying emotional burdens while acting as though nothing was wrong. The more Yandy talked, the more obvious it was that her suffering wasn't unique. It was linked to several aspects of her life that had been gradually wearing her down. She listed her relationship with Mendices Harris as one of the main sources of pressure. Their marriage has never been easy, particularly under the relentless spotlight of hip-hop and love, Atlanta, and the larger hip-hop and love scene world. Every argument becomes a plot point. Every miscommunication turns into rumors, and every personal conflict turns into a public conversation when one is in a public relationship. Yandy clarified that she was emotionally spent attempting to defend her marriage while juggling the opinions of others. She had the impression that she was always standing up for something that people were eager to see fail. As the discussion went on, the group started probing further about Yandy's personal experiences. The second significant turn of events occurred at that point. Despite being surrounded by loved ones, Yandy acknowledged that she frequently felt alone. It was the emotional isolation that results from feeling accountable for being strong all the time, not loneliness in the conventional sense. Everyone looked on her for stability, guidance, and support. However, very few people took the time to inquire as to whether she required the same assistance in return. The group was taken aback by the realization. A few of the individuals seated there had known Yandy for a long time. However, this was the first time they had heard these emotions. Is it making them face an uncomfortable situation? Sometimes the most self-assured folks are actually the ones that are struggling the most. Even Yandy's closest friends were unaware of the suffering she was enduring since she had become so skilled at projecting power. After that, the conversation changed. Understanding how emotional difficulties can be exacerbated by celebrity and public attention. Dramatic personalities and strong beliefs are frequently rewarded in reality TV, but quiet vulnerability is rarely given room. Yandy clarified that in order to avoid coming out as weak or unstable on camera, she had learned to suppress her feelings. Her tendency to repress her emotions eventually became a vicious cycle in which she continued to absorb tension without letting it out. The group was also taken aback when she acknowledged that she occasionally wondered if she was genuinely content with the life she had created. Everything appeared to be successful on paper: business endeavors, TV appearances, a family, and a positive public perception. However, she had been feeling detached from the happiness she believed those achievements would bring on the inside. She had progressively reached a point where she felt emotionally spent rather than satisfied due to the strain to uphold her position as the responsible one. As more people in the room started answering, the discussion grew increasingly emotional. Some reminded and reassured her that strength is not diminished by vulnerability. Others said that they had felt the same way but had never discussed it in public. What began as Yandy's admission gradually grew into a more comprehensive conversation on expectations for mental health and the underlying challenges people face while seeming successful. However, the most impactful part of the discussion was when someone revealed that Yandy had looked after everyone else for years. She had attempted to keep connections intact during trying times by standing up for friends or family members. Now, the question was straightforward yet significant. Who was looking after Yandy? That query lingered in the air, as no one could provide a definitive response. The group was compelled to reevaluate her place in their life as a result. They started pushing her to put her own health first, rather than expecting her to be the strong one all the time. Realizing that this debate wasn't about a single emotional breakdown was the second turn of events. It concerned the potential for a significant change in Yandy's life. She might approach her relationships, profession, and even her function in the group differently if she finally began to prioritize her mental health. Rather than carrying everyone else's worries, one thing became evident as the discussion drew to a halt. It was difficult to seal the door that Yandy's candor had opened, because when someone openly acknowledges that they are experiencing emotional difficulties, it compels those around them to acknowledge a reality that they may have previously disregarded. At last, the resilient woman on whom everyone relied had admitted that she also needed help. It was now up to the group to decide how to deal with that fact. When Yandy Smith Harris eventually acknowledged that she had been dealing with depression, the group's mood completely shifted in a way that no one had anticipated. What had begun as a straightforward get-together swiftly evolved into one of the most poignant discussions anyone had ever heard in Atlanta's hip-hop and love scenes. The group was abruptly confronted with something genuine and intensely personal, as opposed to the typical arguments, criticism, or dramatic altercations that viewers frequently witness on the show. They were no longer observing a plot develop. They were seeing a loved one publicly admit that she had been fighting emotional suffering in silence. Nobody seemed to know exactly what to say for a time. The quiet itself spoke volumes. For years, Yandy had portrayed herself as capable of handling any challenge life presented. When others were arguing, she was the one who intervened, the one who offered counsel while relationships were failing. No matter how hectic things were around her, she always seemed to be emotionally solid. Observing her acknowledged that she was overpowered, which made the group reevaluate how they saw her strength. Rather than perceiving it as limitless, they started to recognize that it had boundaries just like everyone else. Almost quickly, a number of people around the table started to show their support, or some of them told Yandy that they appreciated her candor because it's never easy to talk about despair, especially in front of friends and photographers. People sometimes conceal mental health issues out of fear of being misinterpreted or condemned. By being honest about how she had been feeling, Yandy inadvertently made it easier for others to acknowledge their own personal struggles. The discussion gradually shifted from concentrating solely on her suffering to talking about how many people bear tension in silence, while acting as though nothing is wrong. Her marriage to Harris, played by Mendices, was another aspect of the aftermath. More than viewers have witnessed the dramatic highs and lows of their relationship throughout the years. The way their tale has developed on television has been influenced by a number of factors, including loyalty, distance, rumors, and public scrutiny. The group was able to comprehend how much Yandy had been carrying when she acknowledged that part of her emotional tiredness was from attempting to preserve and safeguard that connection under continual strain. Maintaining a stable marriage while millions of it can feel like living under a microscope as watchers examine every second. A few group members admitted that they had sometimes thought Yandy was just strong enough to take care of everything. They were compelled to acknowledge that presumption could have been unjust when they heard her acknowledge that she occasionally felt alone, even when surrounded by people. Strength frequently turns into a trap because people cease questioning whether someone truly needs assistance when they seem capable of handling everything. The room itself was not the only place where the emotional impact occurred. Fans who saw the broadcast or learned about it through social media conversations started talking about the incident. The scene seemed remarkably authentic for reality TV, according to many observers. It emphasized something really human rather than spectacular arguments. The stress of pretending to be strong while secretly battling on the inside. On the internet, people started talking about how typical that experience is. One individual frequently assumes the position of carer or problem solver in many friendships, families, and workplaces. When things go wrong, everyone goes to that individual. However, bearing that burden all the time can eventually lead to emotional weariness. Viewers were reminded by Yandy's admission that even the most competent people occasionally need assistance. Once they were back in the room, the group began urging Yandy to put her own health first. Rather, instead of concentrating just on resolving issues in her immediate environment, they advised her to devote time to her own emotional recovery. Some discussed the value of counseling, relaxation, and open communication with loved ones. She was reminded by others that strength is not diminished by weakness. In fact, it takes guts to acknowledge when you're having difficulties. The conversation's rapid transition from shock to empathy was one of the moment's most poignant features. Instead of berating Yandy for being weak, the group came together to support her. She was reminded that she was not by herself, even if it had been that way for a long time. Receiving that support in return was an intensely emotional event for someone who had spent years helping others. However, despite the group's assurances, one thing was evident. An important turning point was Yandy's confession. It is tough to just go back to acting normal once someone openly admits they have been experiencing depression. It's all good. The discussion had revealed underlying problems that would require patience, understanding, and time to resolve. And as the conversation gradually came to an end, a new query began to cross everyone's minds. What would happen to Yandy's relationships, her priorities, and the part she has always played in society if she had finally come to the point where she was acknowledging how overwhelmed she felt? The collective, after Yandy Smith Harris disclosed that she had been struggling with depression. The conversation gradually calmed down before an unexpected event occurred. The group's emotional support was sincere, but everyone in attendance was also coming to a silent realization. There may be more to this moment than just one challenging discussion. Yandy had been the emotional center of numerous love-related and hip-hop-related events for years. Atlanta, when tensions increased or relationships began to deteriorate, people looked to her to keep things together. The dynamic had now abruptly changed. The woman who typically carried, she was finally acknowledging that she couldn't continue to do it alone. Despite everyone else's difficulties, the group was forced to face something they hadn't previously thought about, which caused an uncomfortable pause. How would the equilibrium in their relationships change if Yandy stopped being the strong one all the time? A number of people discreetly admitted that they had become accustomed to depending on her stability. It was she who facilitated discussions, arbitrated disputes, and provided guidance when someone needed it. Without such function, the dynamics of the group could change in ways that are still unclear. As the discussion shifted back to her marriage to Mendices Harris, another development surfaced. Yandy implied that she felt like she had been bearing the burden of their relationship by herself for too long, which contributed to her emotional weariness. She didn't make an accusation, but everyone in the room could comprehend what was being said. She had been under a great deal of stress trying to keep her marriage intact while dealing with family expectations and public criticism. After years of attempting to shield a relationship from external strain, a person may eventually start to wonder how much more they can take. In an attempt to ascertain whether she felt supported by meanies or whether the circumstances had been exacerbating her emotional difficulties, The group started posing friendly and Yandy gave a thoughtful response, carefully selecting her words. She admitted that relationships go through stages, and that the tension brought on by outside influences is not always alleviated by love alone. It was clear from her tone that she still had strong feelings for her spouse. However, it also showed how hard it was to overlook the emotional toll. When Yandy revealed something that few people anticipated hearing, it was the most unexpected part of the entire exchange. She wasn't sure how long she could carry on with her current lifestyle. That sentence lingered because it sounded more like someone at a crossroads than like fleeting tiredness. Her obligations to friends, family, business associates, and the people who followed her narrative had shaped her existence for years. She was starting to wonder if putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own mental well-being. For everyone listening, this insight produced a compelling cliffhanger. There could be significant repercussions if Yandy really made the decision to alter the way she lived. It could entail reframing her place in the group, establishing new boundaries with those around her, or even reconsidering some of the relationships that had long been essential to her identity. Then, such a significant transformation hardly occurs overnight. However, when she mentioned that she had reached her limit, it became evident that something important had already changing within her. The group reminded her that asking for assistance or taking a step back does not equate to failure and urged her to take time for herself. Everyone felt that the conversation had opened a door that would be difficult to lock again, despite their assurances. Admitting vulnerability felt like rewriting the narrative that people believed they knew about. Yandy, since she had spent so much time projecting strength, at that point, everyone sitting there realized that the strongest person in the room had finally acknowledged that she was having difficulties, and that her choice about what to do next may have a profound impact. Because when someone who has always carried everyone else's load decides to finally let go of it, everything around them needs to change. It brings up the query that persisted